For the Browns to return to dominance on defense this season, they'll have to overcome one glaring weakness in the form of their secondary. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. I'll tell you why the secondary is the Browns' biggest concern on defense heading into week one. On the flip side, it's the receiving core that's the biggest concern on the offensive side of the ball. Plus, Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons are forever intertwined. I do want to thank you for being on every day here at the Locked On Browns podcast, making this your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed. We hope you make us your first listen. And this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. The Browns are counting on getting back to dominance on defense this year. And I do believe that they have the potential to do that, especially when it comes to their defensive line and how dominant that group has looked throughout training camp, how dominant that group has looked throughout the preseason. I mean, you talk about in Jim Schwartz's defense, like you talk about the defensive line sort of coming in waves, similar to what the Eagles do in Philly and what they did last year in Philly on way to winning the Super Bowl. I think this Browns team, I'm not going to say they're better than the Eagles, but even though I guess we did see them go head-to-head against the Eagles at training camp this year and for those joint practices, but I digress. I'm not going to say they're better than the Eagles per se, because the Eagles have done it. They've won a Super Bowl, all that. But I think this Browns defensive line is up there in terms of the NFL, in terms of like the upper echelon of defensive line units and depth and roster compilation just in general. I'm leading the inside, having a healthy rotation of like Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire at the opposite defensive end spot. You obviously have Joe Tryon Shoyinka, Cameron Thomas made this team. And then on the interior, the backups you have, Mike Hall Jr. is going to be a guy coming off the bench for this team once he's back fully healthy. Shelby Harris, who was batting down every single pass it seemed like a practice, and then Aiden Huntington with his relentless motor. That group is awesome. And so I've said it before, I'll say it again. This defense is going to go as that group goes. I think they set the table for the linebacking core, which I'm optimistic about because of the presence of Carson Schlesinger, who's looked brilliant during training camp in the preseason. The one thing, though, if this defense, as they've talked about, trying to get back to what they were in 2023, trying to replicate, and it's an inexact science. Like I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're going to be the number one defense in all these different categories and like replicate that to a T the way that they did 2 years ago. That would be sort of crazy to have those types of expectations for this defense, I think. But if they can get back to being top 10, that's where I think most fans kind of want this thing to end up. And I think they have the potential to do that. But if they're going to do it, there is a massive, massive flaw in the machine that they're going to have to overcome, and that's their secondary. And it's weird saying that because Andrew Berry has invested so many draft picks and so much draft capital over the years in adding to that secondary. It obviously starts with Greg Newsome, who was part of his first draft here, his second draft here. Denzel was already here, and they made sure to get him paid. Martin Emerson Jr., who's now out for the season with the ruptured Achilles. Like, all these guys now have been sort of stockpiled to bolster this group and make it even better. He's missed on safeties. We know he hasn't had a good grasp on trying to add those guys through free agency, but Grant Delpit's become sort of a staple in this defense. And Kevin Stefanski actually talked yesterday about how Grant Delpit is more of a vocal leader than ever before. Like, he is really taking on being a leader on that side of the ball and embracing that and how much that means to him. And he's taking that on, especially with guys like JOK gone for the season and Jordan Hicks retiring. Like, somebody had to sort of be a voice back there, and he's kind of taking that and embracing it, which is good. So listen, like, I'm not saying they don't have any players, but I think what the problem is here in the secondary is that they're very, very top heavy. And yeah, you can look around the league and find other teams that are top heavy there. But the problem is the Browns are basically banking on like all these guys staying healthy. Because without Martin Emerson, it's basically Denzel and Greg, and your slot spot, I think, is going to be a constant juggling of do we do the three safety look and put three safeties down? Do we do a nickel corner? And Cameron Mitchell, I think he's going to be the first guy up at that nickel spot, but he didn't have the greatest of training camps and preseasons to me. We all saw the touchdown he gave up in the final game of the preseason there with the why am I drawing a blank? The Rams. Didn't have good leverage, gave up the inside. The guy goes in on a slant and scores. Like he had some good moments, but he also had a number of moments where he clearly was just not quite there, not quite ready. And I think the ups and downs of that give me some pause about this group beyond the top two guys in Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome. And we know Denzel's history with concussions. He's got to basically stay healthy for the entire season. And if he does, they'll probably be mostly okay. Because if you have a corner out there who can basically take away half the field, that's a really good place to start if you're an NFL defense or an NFL team. So you feel good about that if he can stay healthy. But that's the big question is, like, can he stay healthy? And then beyond that, like, yeah, I think you saw a guy like Myles Harden, who's also in the mix for that nickel spot, get he kind of had some good moments at times, but also had some bad moments at times. Like, it was just inconsistent from a lot of these guys in the secondary. And they only kept really a handful of corners. They kept 5 corners, which is abnormal after they claimed off waivers Jarek Bernard Converse. They only kept 5. And so that's a little abnormal as well, where normally you keep 6, you only kept 5, and you kept 5 safeties. So you can just tell by the nature of how they set the table for this secondary that even they kind of have some doubts, and even they sort of have some piecing together to do to make sure that they can get through a whole season, that they have the right personnel at different times, that they're putting the right guys out there in the right spots. And so it's going to take some juggling for sure from Kevin Stefanski and from Jim Schwartz to get all that stuff figured out, get it all mapped out, and figure out who goes where, who fits where, all those different things. I'm fascinated to see how they do it, and a lot is going to depend on that group being able to hold up. I mean, you're playing the Bengals week 1, and we know that this unit has generally done a good job against Joe Burrow. Last year is a different story. But like, it's going to start with the defensive line. If they're as that might be the great equalizer for the secondaries. Like, if that defensive line is so good that quarterbacks just don't have time to throw and they're constantly causing problems and forcing mistakes, then the secondary, they don't have to cover as long. That's the name of the game on defense, right? And so maybe that's where they get bailed out a little bit. But if Joe Burrow, for example, week 1, finds time and he's able to buy some time with his legs, which he can do, and then I think he could potentially just tear this secondary apart. So it's going to really start up front for this group. There's going to be a lot of weight on their shoulders. And I think this secondary is probably the thing going into week 1 that is the biggest glaring weakness on the defensive side of the ball that the Browns are going to have to sort of overcome and combat here, because it could cause some problems. Like they're going to be a little shorthanded there, not by any fault of their own, but just because Martin Emerson Jr. got hurt. And so I have some doubts about that unit as a whole and how they hold up for an entire season and how much they can really bank on just that pass rush getting home and constantly making their lives easier. There's going to probably be some cracks at times. How do they respond to that? So we'll see. But that is the biggest weakness I think this team's going to have to come on defense as we turn the page and start looking ahead to week 1. We go to offense, and I got a weakness on that side of the ball too. It's kind of the opposite, the antithesis of the secondary, the cornerback room. It's the wide receivers. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Lockdown Browns podcast. Hey, Locked On Browns fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You could make up to $300 a year just from buying gas that you already need. At first, I thought it was too good to be true. I get it, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card from Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app right now and use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN for a limited time 25-cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code touchdown. Offers may vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. NFL season is back. And honestly, there's nothing better than being in a stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between keens, login screens, and price jumping at checkout, this is a very frustrating experience, as I'm well aware. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime became my go-to app for buying tickets. I kid you not, just last year, I was buying tickets for my wife and I to go see Ohio State, Michigan. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. I pulled up on Gametime, and with just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. You can too. I'm talking about tickets to your favorite NFL games for as low as $100. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. All right, so we talked about the biggest weakness on defense that the Browns are going to have to overcome as we get ready and we start leading up to week 1. I can't believe it's almost already here. Very exciting times, as we know. What about the offensive side? And I think this one is quite a bit more obvious. It's something that we talked about at length throughout the offseason, throughout training camp, throughout the preseason, all those different things. It's obviously the receiver room. That is the biggest concern on the offensive side of the ball, we know Jerry Jeudy. We know what he brings to the table, and I think he is poised to produce a follow-up act that is comparable to what he did last year, really cement himself as a guy that can be a number 1 wide receiver in this league and prove a lot of people right in that regard. I think he's going to go out there, and he's going to perform up to that standard, up to that level. And part of that is, like, you're starting the season with Joe Flacco at quarterback, and Joe is absolutely going to target him a ton. Joe and him already have, it's pretty obvious, a lot of chemistry together. It's going to feel like Amari Cooper and Joe Flacco from 2023, only this time it's Jerry Jeudy instead. I have no doubts in my mind that him and Joe Flacco are going to be just fine. They're going to rack up a lot of points or a lot of touchdowns. They're going to rack up a lot of yards because they're going to be on the same page. It's an elite receiver playing, maybe people will push back on elite, but I think he's a great receiver with a quarterback that knows what it takes to be successful in this league, running offense, all those different things. And I think he's going to obviously accomplish that today or this year. Now, where things then get interesting is after that, because Cedric Tillman, and we actually just talked to Cedric Tillman on Thursday, and I liked what he had to say. Like he was asked about the team having so much faith in him, like not going out and adding at the receiver room another number 2 guy and banking on we think Ced's ready for this. And he said, yeah, that means a lot to him, but that now he has to go out and prove it on the field, which is 100% true. That's been, I really like Cedric Tillman. I think last year you saw the moments. You saw him maybe turning that corner, and then the concussion he suffered derailed things and kept him out for the remainder of the year, and that was unfortunate. But, I'm rooting for him. I want him to be successful, and I want him to be able to cement himself as that number 2 receiver, but he's got to show us, right? He's got to go out and do it on a regular basis, week in and week out. I think Joe Flacco helps him a little bit too, which is good news. I think he's probably ready for that, but we have to see it first. We have to see him to believe that he can be that number 2 wide receiver and be as prominent in this offense and as an NFL player that the Browns think he is. After that, it's Jamari Thrash, who's had a great camp in preseason. Don't get me wrong. Still a lot to prove there. It's just an inexperienced group. And that's not even including Gage Larvadan, who's obviously an undrafted rookie who made this team. And they're just lacking in that room. It's not a secret. Everybody knows it. I'm not saying anything shocking when I mention this. And that is clearly the group, the position group that the Browns are going to have to overcome the most on the offensive side of the ball as we talk about what on defense they have to overcome and what on offense they have to overcome. That's the one with a bullet, number 1 with a bullet. The group that is going to be the biggest question is that receiver room. I'm not worried about the offensive line as much. They're a veteran group. They know you kind of know what to expect with them, especially going back to Kevin Stefanski's offense. You know what to expect from Joe Flacco. There's going to be some good, there's going to be some bad, but behind that offensive line, I think he can do what he needs to do and operate this offense effectively. The run game, I think late in the preseason, we saw it start to come around a little bit, and I think that's obviously great news. They're going to have to, carry that into the regular season and see if they can kind of keep it going, especially without Quinshon Judkins in the building. But even though that group's missing him, I feel better about the running back room with Jerome Ford, who you've at least seen before, and Dylan Sampson, who's been very prominently involved in the offense, more so than I'd trust this receiver room right now that's just, again, so young and inexperienced and hasn't proven a ton just yet. I mean, even Jerry Jeudy, to a degree, still has something to prove because, like I said, I think he proved he's the number one wide receiver, but there's a lot of people out there who are like, you got to do it again. You got to replicate it. You got to stay atop the leaderboard in certain categories to be in that conversation as one of the best in the league or a true number one wide receiver, or maybe even be on the fringe of a top 10 list. And I understand all that. So there's a lot at stake for that group. There's a lot to prove with that group. And it could be the thing that sort of holds back the offense to a degree. Because listen, I get it. Like, they're going back to run the football more. They're making that as such an important piece of what they want to do offensively and then setting up things off of it, as we saw in 2023 with Joe Flacco the last time he was here. That's all great. But it's still the NFL in 2025. You still have to be able to throw the football. They're going to have to move the ball up and down the field that way. And I'm curious to see, like, if this group is up for that task. Now, it helps that in the tight end room, you have David Njoku. It helps in the tight end room that you have Harold Fannin Jr., who's going to sort of serve, I think, as your pseudo slot guy more often than not this season. And more often, like, and just as he's kind of like your number 3 wide receiver in a lot of ways, just based off of his role in this offense, what we've seen from him so far, and what I'm expecting him to sort of do for this group. So it's going to be interesting to see how he gets involved in this and what his purpose sort of is. And we kind of got some early remnants of that. He caught the awesome touchdown pass against the Rams last weekend. So he alleviates some of that, but even he's a rookie and even he has some things to prove. So yeah, I just, if the offensive side is way easier to pinpoint, because I do think on defense you could have pointed and said even the linebacker room has some questions and all that. But for me, it's clearly the receiver room that is the biggest weakness that this offense is going to have to overcome. And we'll see if they're up to that challenge. We'll see if they're up to that task. Week 1 could be a shootout as we're sort of doing this exercise before week 1 gets here. Can they, if this becomes like the Browns secondary can't stop Joe Burrow and he's putting up a bunch of points because he's so brilliant and he's got some of the best weapons in football, can Joe Flacco and this receiving core continue to answer? That's going to be the big question. I think this Browns team is poised. And I think this Browns offense, frankly, is poised to be more competitive this year, just in general. And that's what I think fans really want to see. But I'll tell you, man, like, that offense probably isn't built for shootouts like that. And so we'll have to see how it goes week 1. But there's going to be a lot of weight on the shoulders of this wide receiver room that obviously lacks in the experience category and has a lot to still prove to people, both internally here in Cleveland and externally around the NFL, that they are a force to be reckoned with. There's just not a lot there. We'll see if they can overcome that challenge. Micah Parsons, the massive trade yesterday, man, oh man, one of those where were you when moments in the NFL. But him and Myles Garrett are forever linked, and I'll explain coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. We at Locked On have an important request. We want to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up. Obviously, it's behind us now in college football. Week 1 is here. Whether you've got an eye on a big-name quarterback or a breakout running back, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in the game. For this upcoming week 1 of the NFL season, PrizePicks is offering max discounts. The biggest one on the board this week, Dak Prescott, a max discount for the Thursday night opener. Cowboys just lost Micah Parsons, but you can get in with Dak Prescott at 0.5 passing yards. That's right, just half a passing yard. The flex play option is a total game changer in PrizePicks this year as well. Even when one of your picks misses, you still doubled your money or can double your money. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Make sure you download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, so we all saw and reacted to the Micah Parsons trade yesterday, a stunning twist in the saga between him and the standoff between him and Jerry Jones, obviously. Not the way I saw it going, especially being here in Cleveland, where Myles Garrett did the exact same thing early this offseason, requested a trade, said he wanted out, said he wanted to win, said all these things, tried to foil his relationship with the organization, and then ended up just signing on the dotted line when they offered him the big money to become the highest paid non-quarterback in football. And how quickly that has changed, because since then, there has been contract after contract after contract for non-quarterbacks that have surpassed Myles Garrett's total. And so I find it interesting, though, that this offseason did start with Myles Garrett requesting that trade, with him ultimately getting paid. And then there was that surge of pass rushers proceeding to do the same thing. We saw Trey Hendrickson get paid this week. TJ Watt got a payday, so he gets just slightly more than Myles Garrett. Micah Parsons in this deal got his payday from the Packers. And I just assumed, though, that this was going to end the same way. I assumed it was going to end the way Myles did, the way TJ Watt did, and the way Trey Hendrickson did, that they'd end up back with their respective teams with the big money in their pockets, because that's generally how these things go. Now, you can never, you never know with Jerry Jones, I guess, is the lesson learned here, because he's his own person. He's a loose cannon. He can do whatever he wants at times. And this time, certainly in this instance, but here's the thing, like, even Jerry Jones in the past has done this, played this game publicly, and then still paid the guy. And so it was stunning that even he pulled this move off, but it proves why it's always possible that these situations can actually end in a trade. And Michael made his situation ugly enough that it seemed like it got a little personal for Jerry. He doesn't like being made to look like a fool, and so he pulled the trigger. And now it ends with him looking like an even bigger fool, at least for now, depending on what happens with those first-round picks that they get. He's getting dragged, rightfully so, and it's crazy. But this does make me wonder, and this is why I say him and Micah Parsons are now sort of forever linked. They both pulled this move in the same offseason. I know Myles was different. Micah, it was the end of his first contract. He was looking for that next big payday, the second contract, and he was obviously worthy of it being in his mid-20s. Like, they're different ages, and so even maybe more so than Myles, like, Micah certainly deserved the massive payday that he got. But it does make me wonder, like, Myles saw Micah pull it off. And so could any of these edge rushers, especially Myles, who clearly made it a thing that he wanted to win, and the entire time, his point was, this isn't about the money for me. This is about winning. And I still believe that was the case when he said it. I just think the money got so big that he was like, well, I can't turn it down at this point. I'll take it. But I still do think in his heart of hearts, because I know the type of person Myles is, especially when he talks to us, like, he's always very outwardly talking about winning. He knows what his legacy is built on. He talks about being compared to the other greats in this sport because they all won. He wants to be in that echelon. His legacy matters to him, and winning has to be part of that equation. And so it made me wonder, like, could Myles just request a trade and do this all over again next offseason? Now, it's not as easy to pull off when you're already under contract, when you're already locked in. That is very, very true. You don't have anywhere near as much leverage to call the shots or choose your destination or, like, do these things when you're already under contract. The team has your rights. They can sit there and say, hey, we own you. Sorry, you're not going anywhere. But what's stopping him from pulling out my team isn't good enough, or we don't have a quarterback, or I want to win card again, and trying to force his way out of town? And ultimately, it could come down to, like, how ugly Myles would want to make a situation like that a second time around if he were to do it. Because I said back in the winter, I thought he'd only take it so far because he cares about his reputation in Cleveland. He cares about the fans here. And if he decided, you know what, I don't care about that anymore, all bets are off. My only sole focus at this point is winning football games, chasing championships, winning Super Bowls, because I'm that caliber of a player, and I want everybody to know I'm that kind of caliber of a player. So I'm going to go out and request a trade again. Like, the only thing that stops him from doing that in my mind is that he cares about his reputation in Cleveland and how the fans feel about him here. He's very close with LeBron. LeBron sort of consulted with him on his trade request from the beginning. So clearly there's a relationship there where he values that, and he probably has learned from what LeBron did when he left town. And so that's the interesting sort of wrinkle here is like, now that he's seen it can happen, now that he's seen what it took for a guy like Micah to get his way out of town, walking around before a preseason game eating chicken wings and telling people to call him if they want their team to trade for him and all that different stuff. Like Micah took it to another level. He didn't care about burning bridges. Myles, I think, seemed to care about that a little bit more. And so he's still here. Micah's not. And again, leverage is lost when you're not in a contract negotiation. I 100% get that. But I do wonder if Myles could just repeat the same thing each offseason until he gets what he wants or tries to force his way out or end up in a situation that maybe he feels is better. Because let's face it, this Browns team, it's going to take a couple years potentially to get into contention. Unless they really nail the quarterback next year if they draft one in the first round. And then they're like the Commanders and Jaden Daniels, like where they just, hit the ground running, they make the AFC Championship game. That's maybe the only way they quickly turn this thing around. And that could happen, sure. But I also think we all know where this team is at. I talked about it yesterday. They're in this rebuilding phase to a degree while trying to still be competitive. And so it might take some time here as Myles gets deeper into his career, out of his prime and into his later years before they're actually that level of competitive again. I'm not saying prepare for the worst. I'm not saying it's going to happen. It's highly unlikely actually that it is going to happen now that he is signed here. But like I said, Micah provided a roadmap for making a situation so untenable that your trade request actually gets fulfilled and you end up somewhere else. That's all. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thanks for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. If you liked what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. For your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Football with hosts Vinny Lyer and Michelle Madjuk. You can prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager in your league. Or, of course, you can always keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. Talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See ya.